Today, we've got Jack Holroyd, who's our technology sector leader, and he's going to be running through the new rules of sales engagement for 2016. But before we begin, I'm going to run through a couple of rules of admin. So this webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you all after the event, so you don't need to write everything down. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to submit them throughout the thing by using the little question box at the end. And at the end, Jack is going to go through all of them. So with that, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Artesian and share your questions and thoughts there. And we're about to begin. So over to you, Jack.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone who's joined the webinar today. Firstly, thank you for the introduction. So this morning we're here to understand the new rules of sales engagement in 2016. Firstly, a little bit about me. So as Erin introduced me, I run the technology sector here at Artesian. I've been working at the company for 2 years now, evangelizing this change to social selling. Today we partner with over 30 organizations in technology alone in the UK. In my 8 years of selling, I've got experience in corporate sales and startup environments, so I'm coming at this approach from a couple of angles. And mainly today we're going to be talking through the 2016 buyer, what this means for us as sellers in the B2B environment, and a new opportunity for sellers to engage customers, prospects and partners. And I'll take you through a framework that we use here at Artesian to incorporate all of these methods. Okay, so this is a slide you've likely seen before, or at least heard some of the stats. Buying behavior in the last 10 years has changed drastically, particularly in the B2B environment. And in my career, this is summarized by my sales training from my first year as a graduate in one of the world's largest organizations. It was a really strong sales school, and the focus then was all about how to structure a sales call. The focus was around how can I extract the right information from a buyer for 40 minutes likely, to come back to them with something, to come back to them with a sales approach that will map what they've been telling me. In the last couple of years I've been working at Artesian, I've never really had that luxury given to me anymore. You've got to be a lot more captivating, intriguing and proactive to even earn the right to be in front of a buyer for 5 minutes. And one of the things we practice at Artesian is trying to work the 90-second meeting, how to derive value within the first 90 seconds to earn that next 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So time is precious now to buyers, and that's really impacting a lot of their approach. One of the key stats here I want to focus on with regards to the next slide is that first one. 74% of B2B buyers conduct more than half of their research online. You can start to see that this is having a real impact in B2B sales, and I'll show you in the next what impact this is having. So predominantly, if we look sort of 5-10 years ago, and this is a study presented by Neil Rackham. Neil Rackham is famous for authoring Spin Selling back in the 80s. But he talks about how 5 or 10 years ago, if you're selling a product or you're selling a solution, it didn't really matter. The involvement and the requirement on a sales guy was the same. They needed to educate the buyers. They needed to inform them how it's going to map to what their needs are. They were reliant on sellers to do that job for them. Fast forward 5 or 10 years, and it's completely changing. Product sales now, as I say, we're talking about a lot of that. And there's a really interesting report called "The Death of a B2B Salesman," which is by Forrester and an analyst called Andy Hoare, and he projects in the US alone, 22% of sales reps will be replaced by e-commerce sites or automation at the product end by 2020. So again, if you're pushing products or you're just talking about products and not understanding how that maps to a customer, it's going to be little need for a seller in that space anymore. So we all need to be a little bit more focused on solution selling, and guess what? To be a solution seller, you need to be customer focused. You need to understand what the outcome is for the customer. So here I'm going to talk to you about the opportunity for sellers with this space, because buyers are doing a lot of their research online, but it's a two-way thing. Sellers now have an opportunity to do a lot more of their research online before engaging buyers. The opportunity now to personalize, to become a lot more valuable, being greater for a salesman than it is of us sellers. So I'm going to take you through an Artesian account plan. We talk about now there's a lot more individuality with regards to selling. We're talking about business. We structure it around something called business to human. So you're not selling to that big corporation anymore. You're selling to that individual who's working in a role. And how do you make this necessary? How do you make this relevant and pertinent to whatever that person, that individual's got top of mind? So this is an Artesian account plan that we structure and is now a 360-degree engagement opportunity for sellers in the modern day world. And that's structured by these doors and these ways to access the seller. So firstly, we're going to talk to you about the front door. This is the classic sales approach to engaging. Could be unsolicited email campaigns, and you know, this is still a usable method that salespeople use today. You've got to remember from the second slide I showed you, though, 90% of decision makers say they never respond to a cold outreach. So if you're going to use this approach, timing has to be absolutely perfect. But again, it's still valid. It's still something we use at Artesian today. But to make this work, it's got to be the right time with the right message to stand out from an ever-growing crowd with regards to sales. Secondly, I want to take you through something called the value door. Secondly, I want to take you through an approach called the value door. And this is focused on utilizing your network to engage a decision maker. So we focus on something called power-based selling, which is, again, is a book that's been rewritten only a couple of years back. And it talks around that where you can identify power bases within a business organization, within your customer organization. Again, I'm going to relate this back to a stat on the second slide. Remember, the average in an average B2B decision, 5.4 people are involved in that process. So even if you're engaging an individual, it's important to recognize the power base around that individual. So we identify a lot of these things. When you read about power-based selling, at the time, it was all about being on site, understanding the behaviors and activities of the customer you're trying to engage and of the individuals around in that customer at the time. Now you can identify this online. So a lot of the things we look for are, who's following who on Twitter, for example. It could be LinkedIn. Have they worked on specific projects together? Have they been connected for a long time? Are they high in their power and influence lines, which is on the right-hand side, almost viewed? You know, that's something scientifically measured to understand who's clicking on what profile to the next profile. Within my sales career, I've become victim to not understanding this. A good example of that was in my previous role, selling to a top professional services company, one of the top 4 in the world, and not understanding that when a new CIO was coming in, you know, he all of a sudden start recruiting a number of people from his previous organization, and you can start to see all of them people moving across from organization A to organization B, not getting access to these people in the right time. I missed out on understanding his power base. That was all available to me online. You know, I didn't need to be walking the halls at that customer at the time to see that was happening. So, you know, all of these power and influence lines and ways to understand them are out there, and they're visible every day. For completion, I'm going to take you through something called the paid door. So this isn't something we advocate. This isn't something we use a lot. But the paid door is around paying for an introduction to an individual. It's something, as I say, something we don't advocate, but I wanted to give you the whole summary, the whole 360-degree view, just for completion purposes. The eminence door. So I'm going to again relate back to a fact that we spoke about right at the start. 75% of B2B buyers use social media to research vendors and individuals. Eminence door is how you as a seller go about creating the correct eminence for you in that market or with that customer. So, for example, if you're selling into the manufacturing space, are you retweeting things that are pertinent in that space? Are you following the right bodies? Are you following the right regulatory information? You know, you've got to be making a name for yourself within that vertical or within a region or within a market that you're selling into. So, good examples of where this has worked in the past, I'll give you a couple. Firstly, one of our key customers here at Artesian, someone who works in asset-based finance, started with manufacturing as a vertical. He had no idea about manufacturing at all. Within 3 months, using Twitter and using the Artesian platform, was able to build a complete understanding of the manufacturing industry, and eventually started writing up his own newsletters, started creating his own content and curating and sharing this on Twitter, and built up a following of around 1,500 followers. What that meant for that individual was whenever there was a gap in someone's knowledge or a question, he would have almost inbound leads come to him as an industry expert in manufacturing in the UK. Very, very strong credibility. And again, if he's meeting an executive buyer for the first time in manufacturing, he's got such a strong, almost brand that he's going to have that value and recognition immediately. A second example is a customer of mine, and we worked on a strategy around how to engage an executive buyer within a service provider. He was the managing director at the time. And by sharing information, congratulating them on Twitter, congratulating the organization, taking every opportunity to publicize what that organization was up to, meant that his profile was being leveraged above the rest of his competitors, all vying for this guy's attention. And he subsequently ended up getting he subsequently ended up getting an email from the managing director to him, because he'd read his profile, he'd gone onto his LinkedIn page, understood exactly what this seller was about, and guess what? He was very, very relevant to that managing director at the time. So if you get this right, the eminence door is so, so powerful today. It's so powerful as an opportunity for sales to harness that wasn't around 5 or 10 years ago. You know, millennials are hanging around on social media, and you can get access to their interests and what's important to them at any given time. So where do Artesian fit into this? A lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of investment has been spent trying to remove the complexity for sellers and understand what's happening on this myriad of information on the web at any given point in time, and ensure that sellers never miss opportunity to engage with their buyers or their customers or prospects or partners. And we talk about here at Artesian something called the 5 generations of sales engagement, right through from corporate data, which is pretty widespread now. You know, nearly every sales organization around the globe will have some sort of corporate data to understand which prospects are more relevant for them to go and target. And layered on top of that is the news and social media. So now I've got a potential list of prospects. Which ones are going to be most relevant for me to build my solution around, to stand out, to engage at the right time, to make myself relevant at that given point in time. But most importantly, how do we map our sales workflow to this? How do we drive outcomes that are important to sales organizations at the time, whether that's increasing revenue, increasing new customer acquisition? We need to be able to map the outcome of the sales organization to whatever that news and social media and corporate data is there to provide you in the first place. And then fourth and fifth, which are quite unique to Artesian, is how do we measure best practice in this and inform and educate sellers of this new behavioral change and make them aware as to how they can go and improve. And 5, make it mobile friendly. We're all on the road, we're all out in the office most of the time. How do I have access to this information to ensure when this opportunity to engage occurs, I'm in the right place at the right time and able to take advantage of that opportunity. So I hope that's been useful this morning. I'd like to now hand over back to Aaron, and if there are any questions, obviously feel free to reach out in the way Aaron suggested at the start. I'd also like to drive you to www.artesian.co to find out more and understand how you can take a tryout of our service that we offer for sellers today.
Jack, thank you. That was really useful. Okay, and so we've actually had quite a lot of questions kind of come in. So if you guys haven't already, there's a question panel at the bottom of the box, which you're able to submit anything you want to ask there, and Jack can answer now on air. Anything that we can't cover off in the next 5-10 minutes, he's happy to approach via email or on LinkedIn. So the first question I've got here is, I didn't know about the LinkedIn also viewed box. How else can you identify power and influence from people's social profiles?
Okay, so when we're talking about social profiles, we're talking about LinkedIn and Twitter predominantly. So on LinkedIn, you've got the also viewed box, which is, obviously what the question is based around. what I also look for is projects customers may have worked on or advertised. Recommendations are a great way, because if you've gone out to recommend someone and they've recommended you back, that really does indicate a lot of power and influence. Previous companies worked. If an executive buyer's moved from company A to company B, and subsequently people start following them across that path, that's a really good indication that that power base is moving from company A to company B. Twitter as well is a little bit more subtle, but a lot more powerful as well if you can harness it. So first people that people have followed, who are the top 20 followers that individual has followed, who do they tend to retweet a lot? These sort of things, these sort of signs are a great way to understand who's in whose power base.
Okay, and so the next question I've got is kind of answered by what you just said. It was, I get LinkedIn, but how does Twitter help you kind of harness customers? So that's pretty much what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, LinkedIn's a platform used by nearly 400 million professionals today, and it's very well developed in regards to people's usage and way to understand. Twitter is getting there. It's currently getting there now from a business platform. We have got strong, as I said to you before, understanding who follows who's retweeting who is a great way to harness and educate yourself on important people and people that could influence that decision.
Okay, no, that's really useful. So we got another question here. So the new trend is warm calling and or warm first contact emails. So how would you suggest approaching that at Artesian?
So just to summarize, I think my understanding of cold versus warm calling is attacking a number of accounts with the same information from account to account. Warm calling is almost utilizing insight you've gained to call up a customer because it could be the right time. So what Artesian does is tracks over 500,000 sources every 60 seconds to harness exactly what it is you're looking for to have an engagement, i.e. if you're selling a solution that's going to help reduce costs, if there's a notification on social sites or published sites around that company going through some sort of cost reduction exercise, that's a warm opportunity to call. Artesian just does the legwork and the grunt work for you to ensure that you're first placed to be able to take advantage of that. Again, relating back to that fact at the start that we discussed, 74% of buyers choose a sales rep that was first to offer them value and insight. So Artesian gives you that first mover advantage from notifying you immediately when things are happening.
No, that's really good. So one of the questions we've got in here is someone's own experience. So they've identified the CMO and their emails are being ignored. So how do they start that engagement process now?
So it's quite understandable that your emails will be ignored. Again, emails becoming such a used form of communication that so many people are sitting in inboxes that are completely overflowing. How do you use that? Are you following that individual on Twitter? Do you understand their pace around LinkedIn? Is there someone that could broker an introduction for you? Because that's a lot more powerful way of getting in front of the CMO in referral. How do you make yourself more relevant from using these tactics to work around that individual? Direct email is becoming a harder way to engage executive buyers now, because competition's increasing out there, and a lot of sellers are trying to harness that opportunity to have that engagement. I was only with a customer yesterday, and they were talking about one of the top 4 banks, and they have 2,000 suppliers on their IT suppliers list. 2,000 people trying to get an engagement with a CIO at any given time. You've got to make sure you differentiate yourself, and using social tactics to do this and understand their power base is how you'll do that. Okay,
great. Jack, thank you so much for today. That was really useful. We've had a couple more questions asking if you can get a copy of the presentation. Yep, it will be sent to everybody after the event along with a video of the entire webinar. If you want to find out more, feel free to visit artesian.co, or if you would like for us to get in touch with you, here, fill in the poll. Click yes, and we will get in touch with you immediately after the webinar. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.